Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Life podcast. On today's show, I have stunt woman turned businesswoman Bunny Young. But before we get to our conversation, I want to tell you that if you've ever thought about starting a podcast, especially if you're a business, especially if you want to bring guests in remotely, go to getagripstudios.com. That's where I'm sitting right now. That's where this whole thing is being recorded. We can bring in guests from all around the world. But for right now, I got Bunny Young on the Get a Grip on Life podcast. Hello, Bunny.
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Where are you in the world right now?
I am on the East Coast of the U.S.
Oh,
in
okay.
Virginia.
Virginia. Awesome. Stunt woman. Come on. Stunt woman? What kind
Yeah.
of stunts? Tell me
Yeah.
about that. That's awesome.
So my husband and I actually met at a movie studio, and he was a stuntman, and he got a contract to go over to China. And I'm not quite sure if this was the truth or not, but he told her for me to go with him to China to be married. So it's the verse is still out if he told me that just because he wanted to get married, or if he actually that was a thing. And so we went over to China together, and he was doing a stunt show, and I asked them if I could do it too, and they offered me a job. So we spent our first year of marriage with me lighting him on fire, pushing him off a roof, kissing another man, hitting him with a car, um, shooting him, all sorts of crazy stuff, which has made for a really great marriage.
It sounds exciting. I don't know about the kissing another man thing.
Yeah, I got paid to do it too. It was pretty awesome.
You know what's funny about that is that's the one thing about actors I wonder about. You know, like when you see an actress or an actor and they're engaging in the romantic side of acting, and they, some of the things they do are very intimate. How does one deal with it? Aren't the feelings real?
With me and the person that I was kissing, no. So definitely not. Not because he's not a nice dude, but
Yeah, sure.
because there was just no chemistry there. There's actually three different men that played that role, and I can tell you there was no chemistry with any of them. I can only answer from my perspective, and when they hear this, please know that they're the most upstanding citizens, and I have respect for all of them and the professionals that they are. But our kissing was not because it was a live action stunt show. Everything was over dramatic
Oh, I
and
see.
over
Okay.
presented.
Sure.
So, if they approached me and tried to kiss me in a romantic way, I'm pretty sure it would be different than the kind of kissing we were doing,
Aha.
100 feet away from the audience. And they're definitely not as good of a kisser as my husband.
That's awesome. So, a heart condition. In your bio here, it says that you were diagnosed at a young age, and how have you overcome? What specifically was the condition, if you don't mind me asking, and how did you overcome that?
Well, so we haven't overcome it, right? It's
Mm.
something that I wake up and deal with every single day. But I kept passing out. I was pretty athletic when I was younger. And so I kept passing out. And so we ended up at a cardiologist and ended up being diagnosed with what's called SVT, which means that my heart rate goes super high. And then in 2017, I was diagnosed with bradycardia, which means that my resting heart rate is like 41, 42 beats per minute, which, if you're super athletic, is not uncommon. But if
Hmm.
you're not, it can mean that, your blood is having trouble circulating because of your low heart rate. And when I'm sleeping, it can get into its 30s. Um, so there's a lot of awareness that goes into the decisions that I make each and every day.
Hmm.
And I kind of had a choice to basically choose to quit doing everything that I was having fun doing and kind of living and just survive, or I could choose things that would basically put me more at risk for dying, but I saw it as thriving. And as I have two daughters now, and I tell them that, the best I can hope for is to go to bed each and every day and making the world a little bit better. And so, because I have a heart condition, when I lay my head down at night, I can't have this long to do list of things that I need to wait to have done tomorrow, because tomorrow's not guaranteed. So I have to be at peace with everything that I've accomplished today. And one of the most amazing blessings of being diagnosed with a heart condition was that a couple of years after being diagnosed with a heart condition, somebody introduced me to the aspect that I could have a service animal and could benefit from a service animal. And so I got a service dog, and I had a service dog in the early 2000s before it was cool to have a service dog, before all this emotional support animal stuff started happening and people were buying vests and doing all this crazy stuff. So traveling the world as I do for my work and, being a speaker, it also created a platform for service animal awareness and to kind of represent individuals who have six legs, because I don't look disabled. And so people question often, whether or not I'm disabled and why do I have my dog with me and all of this kind of stuff. So, it's given me an awareness and a respect and an appreciation for life, as well as for identifying as an individual that's differently abled or disabled. And it's also led to kind of a really cool upbringing for my kids, or at least I hope they think it is, because they're living their life advocating for their mom and advocating for themselves. Because, if you see me out in public and somebody runs up and says, "Can I pet your dog?" My 8-year-old would be like, "No, he's a service animal. He's working and he's basically saving my mommy's life." So to have that kind of awareness at 8 years old is pretty cool.
Can I raise my hand on the skeptical side of the service animal thing? Can I just
Yes.
ask some questions about it? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is becoming.
You don't have to raise your hand. It's your podcast.
Yeah, no, but I just want to be. I want you to know that this is coming from a place of curiosity, not from a place of contempt or anything like that. You understand? It's a positive thing. But to me, I think the service animal thing may have tipped into a little bit of has maybe needs to swing back from where it was in 2000 when you started. I think it's gone a little bit too far. I've interviewed a lot of people in podcasts over the years, and one of the things that I've seen is I've seen negative behaviors cloaked in the word addiction, bad character cloaked in addiction. I've seen, attention seeking through cloaked in different disabilities. You know what I'm saying? And I think what happens sometimes is the true people that need support kind of get pushed to the side for those who are adamant in their attention-seeking behavior. Do you understand what I'm saying when I say that?
So yes, I think I'm following. And so something else that's in my bio is that I'm a retired therapist. Mm-hmm. So my classic training was in counseling and psychology. And so kind of my broader view on that is going to be the aspect that attention-seeking behaviors, addiction, diagnosis, it's all us humans trying to process and label things and
Yes.
put things in a way that they make sense. At the end of the day, I think every human is asking for something. They maybe just aren't asking for it in an appropriate way. And we are attention-seeking beings. We don't thrive in isolation. We're tribal beings. And so do I think whether or not the popular celebrity that gets busted for having an affair and all of a sudden has a sex addiction, do I feel compassion for that individual? It's whether or not they truly have a sex addiction, or are addicted to women or addicted to whatever it is that they're presenting at. I believe that they have an unfulfilled need, and that if they're honest with themselves, there's a lot of work that they can be doing in addition to whatever it is that the professional help that they need. I do see that sometimes be taken for granted. But what I think is worse than an individual maybe taking for granted a label or an addiction or that kind of use of terminology is that society is overwhelmingly shifting towards it's the default thought is that they're probably faking, or it's probably not a real diagnosis, or that the person's probably not actually disabled. And so many people are being left without care and left
Hmm.
without proper attention, or are not asking for it, or seeking alternative manners in extreme manners in some case, whether it be committing acts of homicide or suicide, in order to fulfill whatever it is that their needs are. And they may not even know what their needs are. They
I
may
think a
need
lot of it.
professional help in
I
identifying that.
I think that I'm really interested in this topic. Okay, so um, why it's almost as if I don't know what it is. It's almost as if as abundant and rich and blessed as our societies are, Canada, the United States, Western countries, okay? Wealth beyond our wildest imaginations 100 years ago, right? Why is it that so many people, it seems to people like when you see surveys and this sort of stuff, you'll see one thing that says, Steven Pinker says everything's getting better, right? The world is a safer place. There's less crime. There's less diseases are being conquered, and healthcare is growing, and we're coming out of poverty. But then, if you take a poll of the public, you'll see that the a majority of people think things are getting worse. They think that there's a sense that society is not filling the basic needs of community for people, or that people can't feel safe in their communities. And then on the other side, you're hearing that the communities have never been safer. What is it that's missing in our society or did just people always need support animals and they always needed this type of therapy and weren't able to get it? Like, what is it that I'm missing what is it about our society now that it seems that people are struggling so much with this?
It, to make a blanket statement, we suck at taking care of ourselves.
Hmm.
Um, I need a service animal because if my heart rate starts to get up, my human predator brain kicks in and goes, oh, yeah, but I can do these three more things and then I'll take a break.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm going to ignore that and then push myself into a medical situation. Or if I think I need to, and this is not why I need a service animal, but if I think I would be healthier if I got up and I exercised some more, I'll start that tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes 10 years from now. And now I'm
Mm-hmm.
in a situation where I'm medically at risk because I'm unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this idea of working a 40-hour work week, like, why are we working a 40-hour work week? Where is it scientifically proven that it takes 40 hours for us to complete our jobs, or a 9 to 5 type thing?
Mm-hmm.
So we're really poor at saying, what is our unique value? Like, what were we put on this earth to do? And we're really poor at advocating for our self care, and kind of, when I say putting ourselves first, I'm not doing it in a selfish manner. I mean in a committed manner,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's optimizing our um, mindset, optimizing our physical capabilities, all of these kinds of things. And because I have a cardiologist and a couple kinds of cardiologists, because there's different kinds of cardiology, most often there's a pill for everything or a
Mm-hmm.
surgery for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And no one is talking about, oh, well,
Particularly in
could
the
we try
U.S.,
this?
particularly in the United States.
Yeah, and could we try this instead? So why do I have a service animal? Because I'm an idiot when it comes to taking care of myself and listening to, whether my heart is too high or too low. And I need an animal that, for some odd reason, can naturally detect when my heart rate's too high or too low. And then also in an emergency situation, he can get my medication or get a human. And because I'm unstable on my feet, I could use a cane, but the chances are is that I would say, oh, I'm just going to walk those 50 feet. I don't actually need a cane.
Mm-hmm.
And if I stand up, my service animal is going to be next to me and he's going to make sure that he's walking next to me and taking care of me. And if I don't use him and I fall down, he'll be there to pick me up. I have 6 legs because I'm a more complete person when I have 6 legs. But as far as you're asking me why, as for society, I would say okay, why in a world that has never before been more connected? We've never had more social media and ways to talk to each other. Have reports of feelings of isolation and loneliness never ever been so high?
I can answer that question, I think.
Okay.
I think it comes down to the difference between synchronous and asynchronous communication. So when you're when you're when you're text messaging somebody or you're on social media, that type of communication is asynchronous, meaning that there's no feedback. And I think one of the things that has happened to us as a species in the modern world, we humans, we naked apes, we very frail things that are walking this earth right now, is we rely very, very heavily on the verbal tones in people's voices, their body languages, how they smell, to understand that what we are saying is appropriate or inappropriate. And when we're communicating on social media, we're turning over our intentions, we're turning over all of the synchronicity of our communication over to others to imbue for us. So, for example, you could send somebody a text message with a light heart saying, whatever, and somebody could imbue some sort of negativity into that. And so it creates like a communication. And then there's also no feedback. There's no, like, the most powerful form of communication. I'm not supposed to talk. Scott's going to start telling me, yeah, your guest is supposed to talk. But the most powerful form of communication humans have is touch or lack of touch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we come away from that. So, for example, if your husband was unwilling to touch you, right? That would
Yeah.
be the most powerful message he could give you. No matter what he
Mm-hmm.
says, he could say, Bunny, I really love you, but I'm just not going to touch you anymore. That would mean nothing to you. Like anything he said after that, any message he sent after that would mean nothing. So when we're engaging, this is a disconnection. This is not a connection. And I think Twitter is the best example of complete and total disconnection between people. So I think that it may seem that people are more connected with one another than they've ever been, but I actually think that people are more disconnected and lonely than they've ever been in the history of the world,
So,
maybe.
in order for me to receive you touching me or my husband touching me,
Or lack of
as
touch. Hang on. It's also
or
like,
lack of
right?
touch.
So, for example, I have women that work for me. My lack of touching them, right? My respect for their space as like I'll go up to a male employee and I'll put my hand on his back and tap him, right? And that's like a male to male gesture of approval, say. But I won't do that to a woman. And that not doing that to a woman is a very clear signal to her that she's also safe. You understand? Like the touching and the non touching. It's very clear when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. You understand what I mean? So the lack of touching is also very safe in certain instances, Bunny. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that. But yes.
So, but it's a whole nother thing because it's not just a male female thing. Because I don't like being touched, but I don't like being touched. Period. Like end of story. And I often go to these women's events, or if I'm speaking at a women's conference and I get on stage and I'm vulnerable and I
Mm-hmm.
share vulnerability, I get off stage and people want to hug me and touch me,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes me really uncomfortable. I don't like
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is another great reason to have my service animal, because he stands between me and people, and then it immediately removes the temptation for somebody to come up and just try to hug me, because I just don't like being touched. It's been that way since I was little.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter whether I'm a male or a female, I'm Bunny, and I don't like being touched. And those who have a relationship with me understand that. So what I was going to say is that it goes to my connection with myself, because I've been in plenty of situations over the years where somebody's come up and just tried to hug me, and I did not have the confidence, the connection with myself, or the permission to use the voice that I have inside me to say, no, thank you. I really don't like being touched, and not worry about if that's going to hurt their feelings and not worry about what that's going to do to our relationship, but really, just go with the instinct of, hey, this is my space and my permission, and I don't feel comfortable in this situation. And so what you were saying as far as with the cell phones and with Twitter, when I look on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and I post something that means something to me, so I post a selfie or I post, my daughter's first surfing lessons, and I get 0 likes, 0 comments, 0 hearts, does that make that moment any less significant? Well, by our current society standards, how many likes and followers and people that care about me mean how influential I am, or how powerful I am, or how valuable I am. But you see, I don't look at that for intrinsic value. I don't look to my social media accounts, or even to get on this podcast. It's like, well, how many followers do you have, or how many likes do you have, or does that your podcast is based around the idea that these regular people have this amazing value that you want to share with people. So there lies this conflict. If you want to get the podcast out to all of these people through email and through social media and through followers, but the podcast is built on the premise that if you're not a celebrity, you're valuable still.
Yes.
And you still have this story to share. And so we're lying in consistent conflict within our own society, primarily, the American society, but it permeates into other cultures as well, where, if I post something that's meaningful to me, I'm risking the fact that you not engaging with it is going to impact my confidence in that moment of whatever it is that I'm posting. And so what I'm trying my best to do is to work with individuals as business owners, as parents, as family members, and my own children, to say your value is not within what somebody else tells you it is. Your value is in you and being yourself, and that kind of ability to confidently say no thank you, I'm not a hugger. I realize that I'm female, and I realize that I am what that is. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
It's not me.
You have a real home. There's stuff going on in I'm assuming you're in your home or your office, or stuff going on. That's fine.
Yeah. So, but being able to say no, thank you. I don't want to be touched, or here's my service animal, and we're not going to pet him. So being able to, and I've been accused of being rude, or being too direct, and I don't know where along the lines of advocating for myself, sugarcoating became necessary. Where me saying, please don't hurt my feelings or invade my space, I had to concern myself with whether or not that was going to hurt your feelings. You're doing something that is going to make me feel unsafe and is going to make me uncomfortable. And yet in my delivery of that message, which is just establishing a boundary for our relationship, right? Rules of engagement.
Sure.
Now you're going to go and tell somebody that I'm a bitch or whatever it is, because I didn't act within the manner that you were expecting me to.
For the
because
audience,
I'm a female,
that's person X, not Michael Colligan. Because I'm very similar to you, right? I am not a big, I love to hug my children, okay? But I think there's an interesting thing. I don't like when I was younger, there was less of this. People would shake hands and stuff like this, but there seems to be more of a huggy, kissy culture that's emerging. People have to touch each other closer or something like that. And I'm not so comfortable with this. I'm not when I hug somebody, it's actually a very important act for me. There's a spiritual, and people call me whatever for this sort of stuff, whatever it is, but I actually release a spiritual energy to that person. And I only have a certain amount of it. You understand what I'm saying? And
I totally got it.
and it drains me. Like if there's people come up to me and they, oh, Colligan, it's like, no, we're good. We can just shake hands, or I do a lot of fist pumping in my office.
Yeah.
But I find that, my giving spirit becomes very drained when I'm in an environment where I have to hug people. And as weird as it sounds, I do a lighting podcast on this. And I even find that sometimes when I'm engaging with people in the industry who listen to my podcast on a regular basis, they feel very intimate with me because they listen to my podcast a lot. But I don't share that intimacy with them. So it's a little awkward for me at times, and when I'm talking with them. So, there's like, with social media and especially with podcasting, I notice there's a price to pay because you're being intimate with people, or you're sharing. Like I've had some pretty deep moments on my show with people, and others have shared in that. And so they kind of own it in their own way. They own a piece of you, Joe Rogan talks about this a lot, about this feeling of, being feeling like as if podcast is different because you're not acting. I'm not acting. Bunny's not acting right now. You're being Bunny Young and I'm being Michael Colligan.
Yeah.
So I think these devices and the mass distribution of technology is creating, it's a pressure towards egotistical narcissism or something negative that you can get pushed there. But I wanted to ask you, you mentioned it earlier, and before I forget, I wanted to ask you, what have you been put on this earth to do, Bunny?
Make the world a better place, specifically through work-life alignment. So I ask adults the question that they probably haven't been asked since they were in kindergarten, and that's, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then hold that space to create the permission for them to fulfill whatever it is in that manner. I firmly believe that the closer you are to operating in that purpose and in that value, the better human that you'll be. And that if everybody on this earth did more of what they were put on this earth to do and lived more of, let's call it a purpose-driven life, that we would see a reduction in therapy. We'd see a reduction in the use of psychotropic medications. We'd see a reduction in crime and violence. Because I believe that all of that comes from this gap between where you are and the frustration of where you want to be, or of not knowing what it is that you want to be. I've counseled so many people who are so unhappy with their jobs, but they don't leave because they need a paycheck and they don't even know where to begin on where to start. And they can't find a job description that doesn't resonate with them. Well, I didn't find a job description that resonated with me. Mm-hmm. And I created one. And I'm not saying that everybody should go out and be an entrepreneur and that they're built for that. But I think there's plenty of room in this world for a side hustle. And sure. I that, exploring who you are and what it is that you're meant to do, and having those boundaries of things that you're not willing to compromise on or sacrifice. One of my core values is authenticity and being who I am. And when I'm going to go speak, I tell people that my speaking, if it's a live speaking show, it's going to be rated PG-13, which means one F-bomb per 90 minutes. And that's who I am. And I don't want to, it's not that I want to be disrespectful, but I also don't want to worry about offending somebody in the room because I didn't set appropriate expectations of who they were encountering. And so I think that authenticity is why I connect with people. And one of the things that I've struggled with social media is maintaining that authenticity while playing with all of the social media algorithms and filters and playing by their rules, to the point that it's just inauthentic for me to kind of put myself in a weird box in order to be successful on social media. I'm very successful in live, live and in person. I'm very successful speaking. I'm very successful in the work that I'm doing.
How do you measure success?
I'm sorry?
How do you measure success? Because you're saying you're successful. How do you measure it? It's like for me, I could go off on a tangent here, but I find I have 3 daughters. And I find the world, the social world, particularly the social media world, extremely dangerous for women.
Okay.
More so than men. So, for example, I have a son and 3 daughters. And if you gave my son a computer and told him to do something, he's going to go play video games on it. And he's going to play whatever, shoot 'em up video games with his buddies over the internet. And they're going to laugh and talk. And even though I'm not a huge fan of it, it's not much different than what they would do if they were together. Okay. They would construct some game, find an enemy, and attack it. Right. But the social media is there's almost an element of passive aggressive violence towards women on it, like a way of the comparisons and the physicality of it, the picture nature of it, the competitiveness in it in terms of lifestyle. Like as women get older, it stops being selfies and risque selfies and moves into like my perfect family and my perfect Christmas tree and my perfect home. And there's like this extension where not only are you keeping up with the Joneses, but you're trying to be the Joneses. Does that make sense? And there's a lot of pressure on women towards that, more so than men, I think. Anyway, it's an opinion.
So I think what you asked me is, how do I define success?
Yes.
And so I have 2 daughters. They're amazing. And for them to be able to have something that they could be proud of me for, to leave something that they could be proud of me for. Now, remember, I have a heart condition. And so there's this legacy word that I use. And so being able to leave a legacy for them where they're confident that their mom made the world a better place. So whether that's because I made cinnamon rolls that day, whether that's because I took the extra 10 minutes while I was exhausted to listen to them read, or whether that's because at my memorial service, there's going to be, 800 business owners that show up and say, we're confidently moving in the direction of making the world a better place and making a difference because of spending time with your mom. That's what happened when my grandfather passed away. I mean, we had this room full of individuals that probably 80% of them were complete strangers to our family, at least to me as the granddaughter, right? Maybe some other family members knew them. But they shared how positively my grandfather had impacted their lives through his company, through his gestures, through his existence. And he didn't do it for the social media followers. He didn't do it to be featured on the news. He didn't do it to be on Good Morning America. He did it because he wanted to make the world a little bit better. And because he didn't even put words to that. It felt like the right thing to do at that time. And he saw people. He didn't see, criminals. He didn't see addicts. He just saw people. And he understood somehow that helping someone else would and positively impact the world, and it would come back around and help his family in some way, shape, or form. And so that's how I measure success. I journal every morning and every night. And so there's 3 little questions that I answer. And it's, what are you grateful for? And your wins, and then your lessons. And I answer those questions. And some nights it's really hard. And some nights it's easy to fill one category or the other. But at the end of the day, I'm grateful because I was given another day on this earth to do what I'm supposed to be doing. And I can't tell you with certainty that I nail it every single day, but it gives me an opportunity to reflect on it. And even if it's in the 10 seconds before I go to bed and I write a note to slip into her lunchbox the next day, or I write a note to slip into my husband's army bag, which he probably won't find for the next 3 years because who knows how often he actually goes through that bag. It's going to make a difference. It's going to make a positive difference. And, that's really how I measure whether or not I'm succeeding on my purpose. It's not about whether or not I'm successful, because it's a never ending journey for me. And it's not saying that it's not enough, but I believe as long as I wake up in the morning, there's more work to do, right? Like if my work here on this earth was done, I wouldn't have woken up.
Right.
And so I'm here to make a difference, and I'm here to have that positive impact. And so you were talking about handshakes. And this is something that I have a group of, call it like a mastermind, but they were saying, well, you don't want to shake hands. And I'm like, yeah. And the fist bumping thing is fine. But this is a closer group. It's kind of more special. And I said, you know what I would do? Because I did this with my girls. I said, you know how ET touches something and heals it? I said, if I could have people switch to the ET form, because it's intentional. You can't touch your finger to my finger without like being intentional about it. You have to slow down.
You have to be very careful. You'd have to be very careful.
And more than a hug, which is heart to heart, like this is a direct share of energy that's a little bit farther from my heart. So to get into the energy thing, it's a little bit less intimate. It's a little bit less sacred.
And at the same time, more purposeful in a way. Like you have to really try to do it.
Yeah.
Like you'd have to really, it's like we are going to touch, and our touch is going to be limited to this, but we have to be very careful about it because we'll miss the mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. That's really, really
today.
That's awesome.
That's how I was successful, is that I just taught Michael and I just taught, your listeners that we're going to start the whole ET thing instead of, giving your all. It's setting a clear boundary. Here's what you get.
You've used the word boundaries a lot on this show.
Yes.
You've probably said it about 16 times. I've been marking it as you beside it.
Did Scott count it, or do you count it?
No, I'm just going like this. I wrote down boundaries and then I was going like this every time. Like you said boundaries, right? I was just going like that because it's interesting. The we kind of live our words in a way, and our words, sometimes I'm very interested in the meaning of words. Like I ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to know what words actually meant. And then, on this journey of words, if you really study words and what they mean, you find out weird things. Like jealousy and envy aren't synonyms. They're actually opposites. They're completely opposite emotions, right? And people say, well, you're jealous and you're envious. You can't be those two things at the same time. They're completely different. And so what is a boundary to you? And do you have boundaries for others and yourself? Talk to me a little bit about boundaries and what they mean to you.
Okay, so I want you to write down a word that we're going to return to, because I'm going to address your definition and my definition of this word. So write down selfish.
Selfish.
And we'll address that. So boundaries, if you ask me, I have a master's degree. And if you ask me where the most meaningful education has come for me, it's from working with horses, right? Riding horses, learning how to take care of horses and have a partnership with horses, and surfing. And so boundaries for me, when you're in a herd, there's a way to set boundaries with other herd members. There's a way to set boundaries for the entire herd to keep them safe. Mm-hmm. There's a way to set boundaries for, the entire kind of like ecosystem of the world in a way that makes it work more efficiently. And as humans, when we use the word boundary, sometimes it's a very like harsh, like wall. And for me, it's just more of a, here's where I'm willing to go to. And right now, not really farther. And because I have that relationship with horses, I understand how the boundaries kind of move depending on the needs of the herd. And so I have my daily boundaries, and I have you said you love cuddling with your kids. My girls know that cuddling with them is something that's extremely special to me, but I don't want to just be like hung on and clinged on and like,
I understand that. Yeah.
Crawled all over. And one of my boundaries is Sunday night football. Like I've got to watch my football. And for my family, they understand. And so I think a boundary is a clear expectation for others to acknowledge, and for yourself to acknowledge, as well as it helps individuals and yourself operate more efficiently within that relationship. And so my husband and my family know, don't mess with mom with football. Like mom's going to watch football, because my husband's not a football fan, by the way. And so, this is my time for self-care, my time to sit on the couch and watch these teams and couch coach, which I'm an amazing couch coach. So if any NFL teams need a couch coach, I'm amazing at it.
Bonnie Young's ready.
But it helps clarify, my husband and my daughter go and do taekwondo on certain nights of the week. And so that's a boundary and an expectation that I know I'm to cook dinner, what time they're going to be home, when I should have dinner ready. If I'm not going to be able to have dinner ready, to communicate with them that they're on their own. And it also helps with me. And I think this is where this happens in work life too, is the boundary that we're supposed to be working from 9 to 5. We're supposed to be working from 8 to 5. Well, I have very different boundaries around that. And I had some bosses when I used to work in corporate that were fine if the fact that I got my job done and I wasn't limited by these time boundaries. But I thought these time boundaries were stupid. There's some days where I get more done in 40 minutes than somebody's going to get done in 8 hours.
Sure.
And why should I have to sit in a chair for the rest of the day, 7 hours and 20 minutes, because you have this imaginary boundary around my salary? So I
think that's an important message for some people, but I think other people should be careful to heed that. I think that there's different personalities around that. I wouldn't advise somebody. I would say this. I think in that respect, I would say that it's important to also respect the boundaries of others. And one of those boundaries may be that you're being paid to be somewhere for 8 hours a day. You understand what I'm saying? And so while you're obviously a highly creative, self-motivated entrepreneur, I think you're born with a lot of that. So I would say, and I'm not trying to coach anybody, but I would say that message needs to be prefaced with the fact that resent for your boss because he or she demands that you be in a certain place for a certain amount of time. I don't know if that's so healthy for everybody. Does that make sense? I think that's.
If you return to my definition as far as my expectations in a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
if you're my boss and you said one of my boundaries is that your butt has to be in this seat for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that clarity around that boundary, because one of my boundaries is I'm going to do my job and not be restricted to a 40-hour week. There are some weeks where I may give you 50. And there are some weeks where I'm just going to get my job done. And so having those clear boundaries and expectations
Mm-hmm.
helps make for better relationships.
Absolutely.
If I had set a boundary that just the way that it works in our marriage, I'm not going to cook 7 nights a week. It's not something that I really truly enjoy doing 7 nights a week.
Mm-hmm.
But if I married somebody that had a boundary that their expectation, right? So their expectation
Mm-hmm.
was that they were going to have somebody that was going to cook 7 days a week. And this was a boundary, a non-negotiable exception
Mm-hmm.
or expectation. Then
you probably shouldn't marry that guy. Yeah, you probably shouldn't marry that guy.
Yeah. So I think it goes back to what you said about communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if we go back to the social media, that is interesting because you wouldn't normally give so many people access to your life and
Mm-hmm.
have such transparent boundaries. And when you do that, and then people have access to it and they have an opinion about it,
Mm-hmm.
That's why you see those posts that are like, there's some celebrities that have turned off commenting on their posts because here they're sharing a slice of their family life with
Mm-hmm.
us. And then they get negative comments. And then people are like, well, they shouldn't have negative comments. Well, you are not setting a clear boundary.
I think it goes back to that asynchronous communication, right? Where you're giving somebody the opportunity without you. Like, here's the thing. When you and I are having a long form, open-ended conversation without a topic other than your bio, and you probably went to the website and said, oh, this guy looks interesting on the podcast, but we don't know each other, right? Now, there is implied boundaries, right? Around, obviously, we're respecting one another's boundaries. And we, as you can see, we're having a conversation. So we know that we were expected. Like the conversation is going on. It's going deeper, yet the boundaries are being maintained. You understand what I mean? So at the same time, we're engaging in that. This is almost synchronous communication, although we're not together. You're not sitting in the studio here with me. But people have to understand when you give something to social media, when you text message somebody, I'll tell you this. I've had people on this show where I've listened to their podcast And they were saying things that were would have been extremely awkward had they said those type of things to my face. But when we sat down together in the studio, they were unwilling to make those kinds of comments because it's very, very difficult for humans when you're sitting with another human to dishonor them in such a way. You understand? To make a negative, it's very difficult. I mean, I interviewed this one girl and I listened to her. I'm not going to talk about it too much because she might be a listener to the show, but she was saying things that once she came in studio, it was a completely different story because I wasn't a faceless, nameless identity group. I was a human being and I'm sitting with her. I'm sharing my time with her and I have feelings too, And so it's interesting how the facelessness or the lack of synchronicity drives spite and contempt and envy and lack of understanding and ill will. There's something about that lack of synchronicity to our communication that is really problematic for people. But if you give that out there, you're giving that away. You're allowing people to do that or not do it, right? So
and our boundaries are evolving as this conversation continues. There will be a decision made at some point in this conversation or shortly after this conversation on whether we're going to continue this relationship with shared boundaries or you're going to go back to your desired path and you can make the world a better place or fulfill your purpose without me. And I'm going to make that decision and determination as well. And our boundaries will then change. And maybe at some point we come back together and reevaluate. But what we were talking about with the horses is that's the decision I'm making. Is that, am I sharing space with this person because they make it a better, more successful, safer life and path? And so that's when I'm choosing to share energy or share space with individuals. That's kind of what I'm looking at from like a herd mentality.
It's interesting because you can drive down a highway and you're in a herd in a way. You understand what you're a traveling herd.
That make you very unsafe in that herd.
What is it with horses? So I have my wife was a horse owner, not anymore. Loved horses. All three of my daughters rode horses. You ever seen the show Heartland? You know that show, Heartland?
I have not seen an episode, but I know of it.
Oh, you know of it. Okay. So my youngest daughter is completely obsessed with Heartland. And last night I went down and watched an episode with her and it was just so much fun. She was so into it. And just to see her just loving such a wonderful, wholesome show. And it's all about horses. And Daddy, can I live on a ranch in Calgary and this sort of stuff. And she absolutely loves horses. Why? And my son doesn't love horses. And we go to the barns where my daughters ride. And it's the vast majority of the people who are using their spare time to interact with horses are women. I find that, why is that? Is there something unique about the horse culture? Is it like it really seemed to impact my son couldn't care less. But we took him, he went riding, that's fun, but he didn't get into that, the caring for the horse, the cleaning of the horse, the cleaning out the hooves, the walking them and cleaning them off. And there's something therapeutic about horses, at least for my girls.
So I can't comment as far as the primarily being women because my aunt is the one who introduced me to our horses. So growing up, we had a thoroughbred and a quarter horse. Okay. And she taught me how to ride and she passed away when I was young. And then from then on, my mentors around horses have been male.
Okay.
And so my relationship or my fascination with horses, it's kind of one of the most unique relationships in the aspect that a lot of people come to a ranch, or if they don't have a relationship with horses, they come to a ranch, they hop on a saddle and they go for a ride for an hour and then they get off and get back in their cars. And they take for granted the literally hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours that it's taken to allow for a predator to be comfortable enough to let, or a prey animal to be comfortable enough to let a predator crawl on its back and take all of these micro cues in order to successfully navigate a path. And so riding a horse brings an immediate awareness and being present. If I start texting while I'm in the saddle, that horse has a brain of its own, and
Sure.
it's going to feel disrespected, and I'm going to end up hurt or on the ground, or,
Yes.
best case scenario, he just stops,
Yeah.
or she. It's an ongoing relationship. You can train a horse to do something, and then they can choose to not do it. And in reality, humans think that we're in control in the saddle, and we get very frustrated when a horse will not listen to us. And it's operator error. Given the right cues, the horse will perform the duties if the cues and mechanics are there and the relationship is there. And I think that says a lot about a lot of different encounters in life, around leadership, around management, around parenting, around marriages. And horses don't get rewarded by more. They're not like dogs where they're going to do 100 sit and stays for 100 hot dogs. A horse may come because you have a carrot, but that's quickly going to wear off. Like they don't get trained by carrots. They get trained by release and by peace. And so they know what they're doing is the right thing, because when they do it, they receive zero stimulus and zero input. The reins are dropped or, released, or the leg pressure is released. And I think that's fascinating, because in humans, if we go back to social media, when we get a like, we want another one, and then another one, and then another one. And what if we lived in a world where we knew what we were doing was because we received peace instead of more stimulation and a desire for more. And you talked about addiction already. Horses have some kinds of addiction, and really the only reason that they're doing it is to fulfill a need. And so if you translate that into a human aspect, well, are addicts using to get bad teeth or track marks or have all of these negative repercussions in different areas of their life? Or are they using because they have these feelings that they don't want to deal with and they don't know how to get rid of them? So you were talking about the energy exchange and how,
do you believe in that, by the way?
As far as the energy?
Yeah. Like, do you believe that there's a spiritual energy?
100%. And again, that goes back to horses. And it goes back to surfing. My husband can't stand surfing. He's like, you work your butt off to paddle out through all of these waves to then have like a 2-second ride back to the beach and have to do it all over again. Well, for me, that's an exchange of energy. That's me putting out this energy to show my value and my willingness to Mother Nature and to, these waves. And then this wave's willingness to carry me back to where I came from, in a soulful and respectful manner. And if you try to fight a wave as a surfer, you're going to lose.
You ride a wave. You ride a horse. You don't fight waves. You don't fight horses.
Yeah, if you try to control the horse and you're in the horse's mouth, you're going to lose. At the end of the day, the horse weighs at least, 8 times as much as you do.
Yeah. For sure.
And so this mindset, you're the one in control in the saddle, is such a fallacy. And this mindset that humans, have this.
Well, that horse could throw you off in 2 seconds. There's no. He has you there, or that horse has you on top of them at their pleasure, actually.
Discretion.
Yeah, discretion. Yeah. That's a better word. So it's interesting that the nastiest horse in terms of like being around or trying to put a saddle on at the barn where my daughters and my wife ride is the best horse to ride. And I find that fascinating. Okay. So this horse, you try to put the saddle on him, it moves. You walk by him, he tries to hit you with his mouth, like he'll come in the way of you and hit you, and he just got a nasty attitude. But you can put a 4-year-old on that horse and he just straightens up and rides, and he just knows that this is my job, is to keep this 4-year-old on my back. But as soon as someone's off his back, he goes back to his nasty, disagreeable personality. And I talk to the lady that runs the barn. She's like, Dakota's Dakota. I don't know why he's like that, but he's the most reliable horse in the barn for new riders. And I find that fascinating. Like, what is this horse? What is this animal thinking? I mean, he has a bad attitude. He doesn't want to saddle on him. Like, you think he was going to kick my daughter off. Like, I take him there. I'm like, is this horse safe? She's like, the best horse in the barn. My daughter gets on. She's riding. She does the little 1 foot jumps to, 1.5 foot jumps. The horse is amazing. She gets off the horse and he's trying to push her with his, or whatever his big snout is or whatever that is. And he's trying to get something out of her pocket or something. And he's just a disagreeable horse. But it fascinates me that that's also the best horse to ride. And it's like, wow, that thing has its own personality. It weighs 1,200 pounds and you're on it at its discretion. It's just, that to me is it's not a snowmobile. You know what I mean?
So you're seeing kind of the equivalent of a human operating in its purpose
Yes.
versus not.
Yes.
So Dakota's purpose and where he thrives and where he's happy is in caring for his riders.
Yeah. He doesn't like getting the saddle put on though.
Yeah, but in any other situation, he's unhappy. And that's like the difference between somebody who's supposed to be inventing the cure for cancer working at McDonald's and you're encountering them as grumpy and you said, you've encountered people that once they're face to face with you, you see their full potential and they see you as valuable and in your full potential. And I just love that horses are so clear about that and that they're so consistent about that messaging. And that they're not going to, we call it buffaloing. And I don't know where the term comes from, but basically horses are really good BS detectors and humans are really good BS producers.
Well, it's interesting. There's nothing. So my daughter's actually, she's 9. She's very good for 9. She started riding. She's been riding for 4 years or whatever. And there's nothing more beautiful than to see them trot or canter, and the rhythm of the horse and the rider together and going around the arena. It's actually a very beautiful thing. It's very nuanced and subtle, but you know it when you see it. Like, you don't have to be a professional horseback rider to look at one kid that you think, oh my God, is that kid going to fall off that horse? Like, you're looking at it going, slow down, kid. And another rider that just looks beautiful and totally in sync with the animal. And it looks almost effortless in a way when it's done right.
Yeah.
Okay, horses. I get a lot of horse talk at home, so I'm going to shut it down right now. But I want to talk about a couple words here that you came up with. One was selfish. The other one was authenticity. And then I kind of wrote one down in between those two, and that's integrated.
Okay. All right.
Why are you talking so much about selfishness, authenticity? Is there something you're trying to describe that selfish isn't the right word and authentic isn't the right word, or what is it?
I know. So I just want to challenge, what's the definition of selfish?
Well, for me, I could look it up, but I would say that the selfishness is I think it's, to me, selfishness is the acting out of greed. Okay.
Okay. So if I
in the negative connotation, like if you're going to say selfishness is benign, describe to me what a benign selfishness would look like. To me, if you're talking about selfishness as a negative word, it's acting out greed. That's what the negative connotation of it would be.
So if I told you, hey, Michael, I'll go ahead and be on here at 9:15-ish, what would that mean?
That would mean we wouldn't be doing a podcast.
if I told Scott, like, hey, I'll be here around 9:15-ish.
Scott's saying no dice. Unless you're like, maybe, there's some people that would command that kind of discretion from me, if discretion is the word. But I mean, yes, that would mean probably we're not going to do a podcast, most likely. Right?
Okay, because I'm not going to be here right at 9:15. I'm going to be here around 9:15, right? Like it's not full dedication to being here at 9:15 or commitment. Let's use the word commitment, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. And if I said I'm kind of in a relationship-ish, like it's a relationship-ish.
Yeah, sure.
What does that mean?
That means that you're not committed, and I want to be unclear as to what things mean.
Okay, so then when I say I'm being selfish,
yeah,
it's less than full commitment to myself.
That's interesting. I actually I actually totally understand I think you're going with this. What you're saying is that when you're being selfish, you're not doing right by yourself.
Exactly. And so
Yes.
wouldn't it then be a better definition if you are dedicated to yourself and fully dedicated to your self-care and fully dedicated to becoming your best version, to be self-full?
Yeah, for sure. Self-full. That's a good way to put it. Yes, full of self. I mean, you don't want to be full of yourself, but you want to be
No.
integrated. You want to you want your personality integrated. You want to understand your needs. You want to understand, the things that perhaps cause problems for you and work towards. I understand what you're saying. It's an incompleteness.
Yeah. So if I said, hey, you know what, tomorrow, like I've got to get a massage, I need to take a mental health day.
Sure.
There are people that are going to say, well, that's her being selfish, and there are people that are going to say, well, that's just her doing self care. And what I'm saying is, I'm giving my all to a lot of people. And so this is me making a self full choice
Sure.
so that I can, with my 8-year-old, I say, refill my love tank.
Sure.
You know,
Charge your love
how's
battery.
your love doing? Yeah, exactly. And so that I have the capacity, the fuel, the energy, the whatever word you wanted to say in order to bring my best version forward
Mhm.
tomorrow.
Mhm. It's interesting. I have one of the podcasts. I've done 5 podcasts with this guy. Luke Sellers is his name. Wonderful. He's a messenger from God. That's all I'll say. I've done 5 shows with him, and he's helped me so much. He calls it showing up for yourself every day. He says, most people, they don't need to get out of their ego. They don't need to run 5 miles. They don't need to change their diet. They need to show up for themselves every day. Wake up in the morning and, do the things that they need to do to take care of themselves. And you see it all the time. Like I had a guy I like this other-ish. I'm other-ish. I love it. I like that ish. I really like that. I love it. But there's this guy and I was talking to him and he's in the gym and, he's a little bit overweight and he's struggling. I'm talking to him. He's like, yeah, I'm tired. And, this and that. I'm drinking a bottle of wine every night and sort of stuff. And it's like, sometimes you're trying to be father of the year. Sometimes you're trying to be the husband of the year. You're trying to, take care of your customers and your employees and all sort of stuff. But if you lose yourself in all that, like if you lose
Yeah.
yourself, and you don't fill your own tank or charge your love battery or whatever there's all sorts of different words that describe what you're talking about. But it's like an integration of you into the world first before you can give to others. And if you do that, like it's like the hugging. It's why you don't like to hug is because it's a giving, and there's only so much giving you can do before
Yeah.
you're tanked out, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's interesting. So then, what is there a city, an authenticity? How is that word?
So I'm from a military family. My dad, my grandfather, now my husband, and so there was this idea of core values. And typically, if I'm sitting down with a corporation or a team, I'm like, "What's your core values?" It's like, "Oh, integrity, and honesty, and loyalty." I'm like, "Dude, like, can we get something that's actually real? Like,
Hmm.
define it for me." And so authenticity being one of my core values, it's just bringing yourself into it, yourself
Hmm.
100%, and within reason. I don't want to say that you're not being authentic, but I
Hmm.
don't want to hurt other people. And so I believe that by being your full and authentic self, you are making the most difference and you are the most valuable.
Hmm.
I believe that if I only gave you 80% of Bunny for this podcast,
Hmm.
that it would be a less valuable podcast. And so this
Hmm.
authenticity is bringing your whole self to work. I'm sitting in an office right now that is the only co-working space in Virginia that offers on-site childcare and that is wellness focused. And this idea that I can bring my 3-year-old with me, almost 3-year-old, and get my job done and walk
Hmm.
down the hallway and have lunch with my daughter means that you're getting a wholer self or wholer version,
Hmm.
a more full version of me, because I'm not having to worry about paying for childcare or getting out of here to pick up my daughter on time, or
Mm-hmm.
feeling like I'm outsourcing the raising of my daughter to somebody else when
Mm-hmm.
she's, something that means so much to me. And so you're getting a higher authenticity level because I'm mom, wife, business owner,
Mm-hmm.
stunt woman, all right here within the confines of my office, which is probably why there's a bunch of noise going on, is because we do have kids at work. But that was the concept behind the co-working space, as far as bringing your whole self to work, and meaning, being aware, bringing your kids, having time for meditation. And if you don't ask yourself who I am, if you don't have practice similar to journaling or meditation or creating space to not do but be, because remember, we're human beings, we're not human doings,
Yeah.
then it's less than authentic. It's in a world where social media and every magazine and every billboard is telling you who you should be
Mm-hmm.
and what you should own and what you should dress like and
Yep.
all of these kinds of
Mm-hmm.
things.
Yep.
You really need to find space and time to find what does authentic mean to you,
I got a
and who are.
I got a question for you. Okay. The idea of the career and the work-life balance. So, for example, I know lots of guys that are business owners, and they if they go to work and work hard and bring home the bacon and all that sort of stuff, they have no qualms. They feel great. I'm a man. I did my job and all that sort of stuff. But I talk to a lot of women, and there seems to be a struggle between where does the priority go? And I hate to say it, but it doesn't come up with men. There's no sense that, I need to make sure that I have this space that I can still, there seems to be something, there's some tension there. Like earlier, you're talking about like these tensions. There seems to be tension for women for mothers between their careers and their children when they're young. Am I identifying something real, Bunny, or is that made up by the
Yeah,
patriarchy?
you
You
know
know?
one of um one of my friends, she runs a company called the Mom Complex, and her name's Catherine Winch, and she wrote a book called Slay Like a Mother. And I say all of that because I'm going to use one of her statistics incorrectly. So now you can go look up the correct statistic. But it was like something like 78% of um, non-paid for labor hours are performed by the female, like mother wife,
Hmm.
as far as the cooking, the cleaning, the raising of the kids, the
Hmm.
shopping, like that kind of stuff. So that's why I gave you all that information, so that you could go correct that statistic later with her.
I'm aware of
But
that. I think I think that's close to it, or it's correct. Yeah, there's statistics about that. So
okay.
Bunny's somewhere in
um,
the ballpark with that. So there, good.
not go look that up for me, please,
Yeah.
so that we have the correct information. Um, so with that idea, I sometimes find that it's created. It's kind of the idea of nature versus nurture.
Hmm.
Is I'm the wife, and so I should be taking care of the kids. But there's some aspects of it of I really do want to be with my kiddos.
I think there's a
I'm not.
biological element to it. I'm unconvinced that there isn't a biological element. I have 4 children, and while parenting, I believe, is as important to me as it is to my wife, that there's something for women that makes it the separation when the kids are younger harder. And you know what? If I get pilloried for saying this, if this ever gets super popular, and people are like, Colligan's a patriarchal jerk, I think there's something there. I think there's something
Well,
there.
and then here's what I can. So Catherine would be great to discuss all of those imbalances and disproportions. Here's something that her and I had a conversation about recently, and that I had a conversation with a
Hmm.
couple other working parents, and my work husband, because I have my real husband and I have my work husband,
Okay.
and he is a work at home dad. And so he loves, riding bikes with his daughter, and he
Hmm.
loves, like, he develops his whole calendar around her. And I don't. I mean, I do and I don't. I would not be happy spending 15 hours a day sitting on the ground reading books to my daughter. I don't necessarily think that I was hardwired as the June cleaver that we see on TV
Mm-hmm.
to do all the cooking and cleaning and cuddling, and some of that is just not in me. I
Mm-hmm.
definitely identify more of the way that my dad was when I was a kid. You know, my mom was super patient, super loving, super accommodating. She's just a freaking saint. And my dad wasn't necessarily not patient, but he had really clear expectations. And I could work alongside him on projects, but I couldn't get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned from observation. And so I find that I really enjoy spending time with my girls. And but I don't necessarily like, you know, getting down on the ground and building a million Lego projects with them, because my daughter is really strong-willed. I'm really strong-willed. She wants to build a dragon. I want to build a pirate ship because that's what's on the instructions. And then we end up in this like epic battle. And so, you know, it's just kind of knowing your strengths and knowing who you are. And I think we do what's right for our herd and what's right for our family unit. But at the end of the day, I knew corporate wasn't going to work for me, not because of me being a new mom. I think my daughter was 2.5 when I left corporate, but I knew it wasn't going to work for me because there was a disrespect for my whole self. There was a lack of me being able to be who I was in order to accomplish what they wanted me to accomplish.
Wasn't your
And I
purpose.
needed to be able, I'm sorry.
I said it wasn't your purpose.
Yeah. And so I, with that gap, I needed to be able to find kind of that space where I could be me. And some of that is giving myself the permission to be able to have somebody who does want to sit on the ground and build a Lego dragon from start to finish, be there with my daughter.
Sure.
And you know,
Sure.
I speak French, and I teach my daughter some French words, but in order to sit down and have her properly instructed, that's not something that is my purpose. And so, you know, having somebody else do that. And so it's just this constant evolution, you know, and I'm not sure I'm ever going to win Mother of the Year, but I don't even know what those standards would look
Me
like
neither.
today.
I'm with you 100%. Like, you know what? So I'm 42, but I'm the, and I'm not that young of a dad. I didn't think I was that. I was 25 when I became a father, but I'm the youngest dad in my youngest class. So I have, you know, so I'm still the youngest dad in my 9-year-old's class, which wasn't typical, but that's, you know, whatever. So I was pretty young dad. And what I've learned in my oldest is 16 now is that, you know, they're going to be their own people.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to have their own priorities, and you can do your best to help them, but they're born with a certain amount of skills, and they also have this sort of stuff. So this idea that you're, you know, father of the year or your children, I think it's unhealthy to be too staked in the outcome of your kids in different ways. You have to love them. You have to feed them. You have to care for them. You have to give them opportunities. But whether they succeed or fail, as they get older, you become less and less of an influence on them. And eventually, if you continue to try to impose yourself into their world, they're going to begin to resent that. You know?
So one of the things that helps me when I'm struggling, as far as I think I posted on social media a couple of weeks ago, if anybody has the manual for raising an 8-year-old daughter, can I please borrow it?
Yeah, please.
I seem to have lost mine.
Yeah,
And so,
I'm with you.
you know, I sit, I take a deep breath, and I realize that in the mathematical equation of her being my daughter and me being her mother,
Mm-hmm.
that I must be uniquely qualified in some way, shape, or form to be raising this child. And this is my truth. I'm not making this for anybody else, but this is my truth, is that the same way that I am uniquely qualified to deliver work-life alignment, consulting and coaching for business owners, and that's my purpose. If one of my purpose purposes is to be her mother, then I must have the unique tools that I'm not even aware of to get through this moment of really tough parenting time. And so, that's the kind of thought that I have in that moment that causes me to take a deep breath and kind of move on from there. I agree with you as far as ultimately her life is going to be her life. And I'm going to be proud of her, even if she becomes a supervillain, which she fully has the resume to become a supervillain at this point. I'm going to be proud of her if she's operating in her potential, and as long as she's not harming people, as long as she's just one of those annoying supervillains. So
Sure.
plus she's probably going to have an amazing supervillain cave. So those are just the kind of things that I struggle with as a human is, am I doing this right? And at the end of the day, the question's not, am I doing this right or wrong? Is am I doing this to the best of my ability?
And it's we judge ourselves so hard in some ways, and the harshest way to judge it's really easy to be harsh to yourself as a parent. Very,
Mhm.
very, you can really beat yourself up. And I think that, one of the things is to accept that parenting is one of the most beautiful things you ever do. It's one of the most meaningful things you ever do, but it can also be really challenging. And it can be, especially in today's day and age with marijuana legalization, pornography, social media, like there is a lot of traps in out there that, perhaps we weren't able to fall in when we were younger. And,
Yeah.
it's a tough time for parents. And as a parent and knowing other parents and, I know a guy at the gym, I was talking to him the other day. He goes, listen, man, if it wasn't for my third kid, I would have been the most judgmental parent in the world. My first two kids were fantastic. They went, whatever, they got scholarships and da 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 da. My third kid, man, until he was 23, the kid was driving me crazy, right? And so there's a journey here. You're on it, and there's ups and downs, man. And I would warn people against the temptation. There's almost like, you ever read? I don't know if you read much literature, but there's a play called "Murder in the Cathedral" by T.S. Eliot, and Christ has three tempters, but the Archbishop has four, and the fourth one is to be a martyr. Right? There's like this temptation that I am going to be the greatest parent there ever was, and my kid's going to have all the tools they need to succeed and thrive in the world, and then you find out that it's not always that way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not
And
always that way.
and so when I was a therapist, I did work in child protective services, which is like our social service division in the
Oof.
States. And one of the things that really messed me up was the thought that, okay, so I've raised like 843 children, but I'm failing my two, you know? And but it's different.
Mhm.
My role is different for them than it is for my own children. And my husband struggles with this because, we had talked, my daughter was struggling to adapt to change. My husband was being gone with the military, and she had changed schools, and she had some new
Mm.
friends. And so she was just having some anxiety around change.
Mhm.
And I said, well, let's take her to, a child therapist who specializes in anxiety.
Mhm.
And my husband's like, well, that's what you used to do. You used to help kids that were going from
Mm.
group homes to foster care, or from their parents to foster care, and help them with the anxiety around this change. So he's like, so why do we need a therapist if that's what you can do?
Mhm.
And I said, because the roles are different.
Mhm.
I'm her mom. I was no other kid's mom other than my other daughter. I was no other child's mom.
Yeah.
And so
You're
it's a difference.
emotionally detached. So, you ever heard the expression, you can't work on your business when you work in your business?
Yeah.
Right? That's a famous expression, right? So, if you're actually the sales manager, you can't really get above that and look at the thing and start moving the pieces around. It's the same thing when you're a parent. you're in the business. You're part of the dynamic. That you have a role in the anxiety. You know, your husband has a role in the anxiety. You have a role in the anxiety. It's very difficult. It doesn't mean it's your fault. It doesn't mean that you're responsible for it. It is what it is. But there's a sense that it's impossible for you to play detached, caring therapist to your daughter. It's not possible.
And it also decreases the amount of resources that she has. So if she has a bad day,
yes,
she can go and talk to her therapist, or she can go and talk to me, or she can go and talk to her dad. She can go and talk to her teacher. Like, we're building this kind of herd, right? Like, we're building with, I know you can't stand the horse stuff.
No,
it goes back,
you get a couple more. You can throw a couple more in there.
it goes back to the business owner. You know, if I'm the sales manager, the CEO, the HR executive, the CFO, you know, my herd quickly diminishes.
Sure.
And so my resources and the people that I can rely on, and, you know, my bandwidth and my energy is all going to be very quickly depleted as I'm serving all of these roles.
Yep. And you can't be your kid's therapist. I don't care if you're a PhD. Yeah, I don't care if you're Carl Jung or Sigmund Freud. You can't do it. I have one more. Well, maybe we'll see where it goes. But I wanted to ask you. So you often hear. So my kids talk to me like, I want to be a police officer, or I want to be in the military, right? Or this kind of jobs. And I see that you have this on here. And one of the things I said to my son when he said that, I said, those are wonderful careers. And there's a lot of careers in policing. It's very diverse. There's lots of different types of military careers are very diverse and exciting. You can do lots of cool things in the Canadian Army, and the U.S. Army's even the wider, thousands of careers in the military in the United States, and in policing and this. But I said, do you know why they call them heroes, right? I said to my son, he's like, no, yeah, no, because it's a really cool job. I said, no. That's not why they're called heroes. It's because it's very, very hard sometimes to do that job. And it takes a lot of, you can see a lot of horrible stuff. If you're a paramedic, if you're a police officers are constantly dealing with people at their worst. Even the traffic cops, no one wants to see a traffic cop. Come on.
Yeah.
A paramedics, your people shooting, stabbings, heart attacks, screaming, babies dying, 911 call operators that my baby's not breathing, and then of course the military, obviously, that path, that's why they're heroes, not because it's cool, because they have a gun or because they have a nice uniform. They're heroes because it can be super challenging and taxing to do those kind of jobs. How do you help them with burnout?
So there's a reason that they wear uniforms, and that, you very rarely will see a police officer or a military individual that wants to be recognized individually. And that's, again, to go back to this idea of we, because all of those horrible things that you just discussed are the burden of we, not the burden of you or of I. And so when we wear a uniform, we become this we instead of an individual. Other than his nameplate, my husband looks like any other. Well, and his rank, he looks like any other member of the United States Army. And if you put the U.S. Army and Air Force all together, their uniforms are going to be slightly different, but collectively they look like military. And so it's this idea that we can share the burden, we can share the load, we have these collective agreed upon values and mission and purpose. And I have my brothers and sisters next to me to kind of identify with and to be together. And when you leave the military and you no longer have the uniform, and you no longer, or the police department, and you no longer have the we in the shoulder to shoulder, it can feel very alone.
Mm.
And then you start to identify as an I, and you start to realize that even though you were in uniform, you shot those people. You were a part of that person's day. You played a role in the ending of that individual's life. You lost so much.
Mm.
And then psychologically, that starts to be a huge burden. And if society, we spent more time as we's in our tribes and not so isolated, and communicated and saw each other as humans, we probably wouldn't have as much war. We probably wouldn't have as much conflict. We probably wouldn't have as much of the horrific things that you're talking about, And so I do a professional development retreat at a ranch, and at 3 ranches in the United States. And we bring teams there, and we bring military there, we bring law enforcement there, and we teach them leadership. We teach them positive communication. We teach them trust. Because if you can do all of those things for yourself, and you can do all of those things within your group, your life will improve. Your quality of life will improve because you're not alone. And for anybody that's listening to this that feels like they're alone, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a law enforcement individual, whether you're a member of the Canadian, the US, and any military across this world, you're still a human. And Michael's a human, and I'm a human. And our ability to connect with each other as humans is what is going to save the world, and recognize that we are stronger and better and happier and safer when we function together and in unity rather than in conflict and in indifference. And it doesn't matter what religion you subscribe to, or the color of your skin, or your upbringing or my upbringing. At the end of the day, I'm pretty sure you're human. And like my work husband and I had a conversation. He told me that our lawyer got married, and I said, a husband or a wife, and he said, well, you thought they were gay? And I said, no, but it's 2019, and I'd like to be respectful of the possibility. Mm-hmm. and address it appropriately. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter if my thoughts, I'm trying to create an awareness of a possibility of a world where my biases and my assumptions are not going to make somebody else uncomfortable or be an obstacle. And so we're constantly in this balance of me being myself while respecting you being yourself. And rather than being in conflict at that, understanding that we can just respect that you're you and I'm me, and our opinions and our thoughts and our ideas are going to be different, but we can still function in respect in order to make this world a better place. So,
as long as that's mutual.
Absolutely.
See, the problem is that, I don't disagree with the spirit of that. I totally agree with it. The problem is that most people, most of us who are humans, who have the dignity of the human, are not, I would say most of us are unaware of that concept that you're talking about. They're just unaware of it. And there are certain people that are aware of it. Let's call them creatures of the light. And there are certain people that are aware of it, but are seeking to destroy that. Okay? And they're actively after that. And I don't think that, I know that we should always, I know that for sure as humans, we do operate on a position of trust, that our default to trust is what it's called. There's like a psychological concept known as that, is that we default to trusting one another. The problem is that, not everybody's operating on that all the time. And on this show, because I explore different people and their lives and that, I've seen predators. I've seen people of bad character, like I've spoken to them, and they're dangerous. And people that are, if we're constantly operating in that perspective, we're in some ways, like, our tribe that you're talking about needs to have boundaries around it too. Okay.
So,
And that
so how
boundary
did you,
cannot be the United States of America. It can't be the state of Minnesota. It's not that your tribe is not that big. Maybe
so
100
how did
people.
you know they were predators?
Um, because they're predators because they were disguising their predatory nature in the form. But before that, they were disguising their behavior, their predatory nature in other ways. And when that was exposed, they turned to disguising their predatory nature as an addiction of some kind. But
Okay.
again, it's the predatory nature again. It's the snake in the grass. And I'm telling you right now, there are evil people in the world. And they're not
But that
mentally
awareness,
ill. Hang on. Bunny, they are not mentally ill and they are not addicted. They're evil. And there's people that are mentally ill. There's people that are addicted. And but there's people of bad character. And then there's full out predators.
I
And
don't disagree with
we
I don't disagree with you.
cannot welcome them, and we have to have bias against them. We have to be.
So that awareness, though, if you operate within that respect
Mm-hmm.
and that humanness,
Mm-hmm.
right? In that self-full, with it comes that awareness that you had when you were talking with them to say, this doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have that awareness, the consequences is that you become a lemming and you're just going to blindly follow whatever advertisement is in front of you. And
Mm-hmm.
so constantly working on that self-fullness and that awareness is what, like, my best friend, would call woke. It's a person that is aware, that is, not just taking something off of Facebook and sharing it because they're taking it as Bible truth, but that is able to discern between what is good for the soul and good for the spirit and good
Mm-hmm.
for the self and good for the world, and what is disguised, and maybe even if it's not evil disguised, but it's deception or it's less than truth. And so when we're teaching companies, we don't start with, a lot of companies start with like soft skills and team engagement and team development.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we start with self-awareness. I teach companies self-awareness and then self-management.
So
And then we
are
move
you
to
talking
team
about the
awareness.
individuals or the holistic company as being self-aware? You're talking about the individuals
So
in the
normally
company.
I'm working with the C-suite or the managers,
Okay.
that are in the upper levels, but I'm teaching them the tools. This is really the key, and what differentiates a lot of the work that we do with my company and a lot of the work that I do with my speaking is I'm teaching you the tools on how to become more self-aware, and then self-management, and then team aware, the idea of how to look at the team and kind of identify when things are a little bit off and what makes you guys function well together as a herd. And then team management, because if you immediately go into the action, you're risking being a human doing again.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the steps of the human being and then the collective human being before we're moving into that. And so that's where you do risk exposing yourself to an individual that doesn't necessarily deserve your authentic self or deserve your whole self. But you also
Or
have
is
built,
seeking to destroy you.
absolutely. But then
Okay.
you're not alone. You're
Right.
building that stronger unit together.
I agree. But you ever heard this expression, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger? You ever heard that expression?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's true sometimes. Like that doesn't make any sense what I just said. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I think there is like a post-traumatic success story, right? So that somebody, suffers in some way, transcends that suffering, and is reborn in a way into a stronger human, right? Or a more powerful human, or a more integrated, complete, a self-full human. And then there's people that have post-traumatic stress disorder, that they have suffered cause suffering or suffered, or are taking responsibility for some actions in a way that's not appropriate for them or something. I'm not a doctor in this, but with that disorder, what's happened to them is they're suffering a mentally debilitating anxiety and interaction with the world because what didn't kill them made them weaker, right? And so I think we, as humans in the world, we have to be very, very, very careful when we're, especially with children, because once somebody is victimized, sometimes they never recover. And so I agree with your message. I only would preface it in that be very, very careful because, our messaging of our stories from deep in our human history, in all cultures, there's the story of the wolf in sheep's clothing. There's the story of the liar and the deceiver. There's the story of the victimizer and the predator, the snake. And some humans are not mentally ill or diseased or whatever. They are evil and they are seeking to destroy others. And they're out there, and there's a lot of them in America, and there's a lot of them in Canada, and there's a lot of them around the world. And they are to be avoided at all costs. They're not coachable. They're not changeable. And yes, they have human dignity, but we don't want to touch them, Bunny. That makes sense?
So I already agreed that there are evil people.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding post-traumatic stress disease or post-traumatic stress illness or post-traumatic stress disorder, if we take that, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, I still believe that's a valid statement. You can change it to what doesn't kill you, you can learn from, or you can change it to what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and you can choose how to move on from it or learn from it or react from it. So the concept that an individual would be broken after being sexually assaulted or after going through battle, they're not broken. They're just healing. And the choice is ultimately ours, however limited our mind capacity may be in that
Mm-hmm.
moment, to choose how we move forward from it. But an individual with post-traumatic stress that's experiencing post-traumatic stress, their brain is trying to heal in some way, shape, or form. And it may be healing by telling them that they're not safe and they should stay in bed. It may be healing by trying to replay the images in their mind to try to make it make sense, because it just doesn't make sense with the world they have, formally been acquainted with. But at the end of the day, whether it's been a 4-year-old that I've been working with post-traumatic
Mm-hmm.
stress, whether it's my own encounters, and recovering with my own post-traumatic stress, whether it's a individual who's seen battle or an adult that is going through post-traumatic stress after a car accident, the foundations, the good news is that the foundations of a stronger individual are there because they're going to be going through it. No matter what tomorrow brings, they're still going to be one day farther than the traumatic incident.
Mm-hmm.
And individuals can choose, and it may not feel like it in that moment, and I totally understand, but you can choose how to move forward from it. You can choose to stay in bed. That's 100% your choice, and I will not think anything less of you. Or you can choose to take that fire that you've been through and develop that as a stronger foundation for the reasons why you're still here, why you survived, why you're still walking this earth, and take it as a sign and a belief that you made it through and you survived and you're here for a reason.
I can't disagree with that. I think it's tough because, let me give you an example. I would let my son, I would advise my son that he could join the army, for example, in Canada when he's 18, if he wants to. But I would say there's no chance you're doing a tour of duty until you're 25.
Okay.
Like, I'm very uncomfortable with young people at such a young age being exposed. Like, it's almost like they don't have a choice in a way, you know? To me, it's like to me that's young for the U.S. Army, which is engaged in a lot of operations. And I'm not sure what the percentage of people that are 18 that serve, or even 17 that serve in tours and stuff like that. But I'm uncomfortable with that. And so and then as a society, I also think that, gosh, if there is a way that we could increase people's sensitivity to the struggles of others without exposing them or opening them up to predators, those wolf in sheep's clothing. You understand what I mean? It's hard because, and it's probably, we're finishing kind of where we started, which was, when I asked you about the service animals. And sometimes I see someone, to hear your story, and I really empathize with you. I can see how that would help. And then I've seen and I'm a human. Maybe I'm completely wrong and my perception is wrong. And I wish those people would forgive me for even thinking this. But I've been in a lot of airports, and I've seen people seem to be parading service animals around in a way that makes me a little less than comfortable. You know what I'm saying? I can't describe it to you, but there's an element that when we make accommodations for the vulnerable, we need to find a way to stop the abuses of that too. Does that make sense? Because it seems to push the vulnerable out. I don't know. Like bringing your service horse on the plane, it's like, I mean, maybe I feel like that's attention seeking to me. That's not, I have my service reptile. You know what I'm saying? Like, seriously.
So in the United States, I can only speak for the United States as far as service animal law. It can only be a canine or a miniature horse. And now the FAA, which is what regulates our flights, has created this thing called an emotional support animal. And thus far, they have changed it where it cannot be a amphibian, a reptile, a spider,
snake.
You can't take like birds, spiders, snakes, anything like that on a plane. But we digress. So to answer your question in the best way from my experience is that if we pay attention to self-awareness first, then we can make a better team awareness decisions. And I think where we're stuck right now is we're trying to make better decisions for the we and for the all without actually becoming more aware individuals and more perceptive individuals. And so you get 10 people around a table and the loudest voice normally wins out versus having collective minds and allowing individuals that are not necessarily the loudest, but may have a really, really incredible opinion or solution to be able to share their voice. And I imagine that it's kind of even like with business coaching. Business coaches that have the $15,000 to $50,000 marketing budget may be getting the most clients and maybe impacting the most businesses and business owners. But does that mean that they're the best coach?
Of course, yes. There's a difference.
Yeah. So, and politicians. So we have individuals who have raised the most money and done the most marketing to persuade the most public attention in their favor. Does that mean that they're the best human advocate? Not necessarily.
Yeah. Not only that though, but, politics seems to, this is another area where, and there are some great politicians, and I'm not going to point to anyone in particular, although I think that the leaders of our two nations might fit this bill. Both, not one, both of them. It seems to attract a lot of egotistical narcissists. And on a policy by policy basis, there's things that in both the Canadian government and the American government that I would disagree and agree with. But there just seems to be something about it that there's a aspect to it which is I'm not comfortable with. Let's put it that way. But I just want to clarify something, because I want to fully understand you. While um, so you agree with me that we have to be integrated and self-full, or I agree with you that we have to be integrated and self-full and aware of other people's struggles and challenges. But I still am looking for how you just distinguish between, or do you believe in good and evil? Do you believe in evil?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you believe that some humans are evil?
I believe that there's evil inside some humans.
I think we all have evil in us. There's like a yin and yang. We have malevolence and benevolence, and those things struggle. But I think some people have totally turned to the darkness. Okay. I've seen it actually. I don't believe it. I know it's true. But how then? How, that loudest voice at the table? It is really annoying actually, and sometimes I've been that loudest voice at the table. So I'm putting my hand up. Where there has to be room for others. Is it a consensus? What is it that we need to solve these problems that we have today of at one time we want to give compassion to people that require it, and on the other hand we don't want to be taken advantage of by these people of bad character and then these predators. How do you find the balance? That's what I'm searching for. That's what this podcast is about, actually. Trying to figure that out.
I'm going to go back towards the being more self-aware. The airports are the worst, Michael. I mean, I'm sitting there and, there's an individual, because now in the US, a lot of, we're moving towards the mandate that airports have to have a service animal relief area inside of the airport. So that we don't have to, we being an individual that has a service animal and is 6-legged, have to leave security, take our dog to go relieve themselves, and then come back through security and possibly miss our connecting flight. So I have a Great Dane service animal. He's huge, but I'm 6'3", and remember that I use him for mobility support as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm at the service animal relief area, and somebody comes in with like 3 Yorkies. And I have nothing against Yorkies, right? And they're all emotional support animals. And this individual tells me, well, I just didn't want to have to pay to have them fly, so I had my therapist write me a note. So I sit there, and then I'll give you another example. So my mother has surgery, and her surgeon comes in to the room after her surgery, and I'm there with my service animal, and he said, "Is that a real service animal?" And I said, "Well, he's not stuffed. He's, not a stuffed animal."
Yes, sure.
And the surgeon goes, "Well, because our favorite place to vacation doesn't allow dogs, and so we bought a service animal vest for our dog so that we can take him with us on vacation."
Mm-hmm.
And here's a person
It's
who
a
has
surgeon. Like, he must make $1 million a year, maybe more.
So it goes back to awareness. So if I could explain to that surgeon, or if I could explain to that individual in the airport that my animal is a $30,000 animal, but
Mm-hmm.
he's priceless in the aspect that he's trained to keep me alive.
Mm-hmm.
And that by doing what you're doing and taking the actions that you're taking, you are not only pretending to be an individual with a disability, but you're also diluting the rights and the accommodations that we have worked for decades,
Bingo.
to be able to get. And I don't think my mom's surgeon, and I don't think the individual in the airport were trying to harm anybody. But I think there was a lack of self-awareness in how their actions impacted the collective human society. And so if they had more self-awareness of, am I making a decision that my children would be proud of? Am I making a decision or am I just making a decision that's convenient? Credit cards are a really good example of how humans suck at acting on compulsivity without thinking about how it's going to impact them in the long run. And so I think, for me, my experience and the answer has come back to self-awareness and self-reflection, because when I'm sitting in the airport, how much energy is it going to take for me to get into it with that individual with the 3 Yorkies? We don't have a relationship. I have really strong boundaries and I have a flight to get to. But by being on your podcast, how many people are we going to reach with this message? And they've invited us into their homes. They've invited us into their cars. They've invited us into their offices by listening to your podcast. And now we collectively, because I'm using some of the trust you've built with them and sharing that just because I'm visiting your podcast, to be able to say, think about how your actions today are going to positively or negatively impact the whole, the collective, and start with self-awareness before we can move into making decisions about team.
Right. So I got a theory for you.
Okay.
Ready for this? So
I'm ready.
The water, and the orcas and the buffalo and the air, they don't know about this little line across the 49th parallel we call Canada and the United States, right? They don't know anything about that. They just cross it. They don't have passports, right? They don't know. The air in Michigan doesn't know that it's not supposed to come over Ontario after burning coal from electricity and go over and pollute Ontario. It doesn't know that. It just goes there, right? So these ideas of Canada, United States, these jurisdictions, okay, my belief is all they are is the accumulation of trillions of human decisions. Just the accumulation piles up from the American Revolution. So, for example, half of my ancestry is refugees from the American Rebellion, or what you guys call the American Revolution. It was really a rebellion to us. And, if you guys want to sign the United Nations law on the perpetual return of refugees, I have a land claim in Massachusetts. Okay. My family would, right? Because we were sent out because we weren't, whatever. So all these places, all it is all these human decisions. And what makes our countries free and safe and good, or bad and evil and tyrannical, is whether individuals in the moment of truth during their day make more good, positive, impactful decisions than bad. And that's all it is. There's no 49th parallel. There's no U.S. Constitution. All that is nonsense. All that is paper. We have the paper, right? I have it written on paper here, right? That I can have a service animal. It's written on paper from my therapist, right? That doesn't make it good or evil. What makes it good or evil is the fact that you need that service animal or you don't. And if you don't, then that's a wrong decision. I don't care if you have the paper or not. It doesn't matter what people write on paper. That's all nonsense. We don't need paper. We don't need the computers. We need the decisions to look to the light, to do the right thing, to reach for that, to become self-full, other-full, and be caring for people. Because to take advantage of something like the service animal dynamic is really to do a disservice and hurt those that need it. It really is. It's not a joke. If you actually need a it's like somebody that parks in a handicap parking spot. Oh no, I got the paper on my dash. Right? I have the paper. This means I'm allowed. Right? Shame on you, man. Shame on you. That's disgusting. You're so egotistically gross that you would behave like that, to take that from someone that might need it. So it's disgusting to me beyond belief, that kind of that unlawful behavior, that low character, people of bad character. That's what it is. I'm sorry, but your surgeon and the lady with the 3 Yorkies are people of bad character. And yes, I'm judging them. Those lost souls out there that are behaving like that. But we have to. I'm not passing judgment, but I'm judging them for sure. If you do something like that, if you put a fake handicap pass on your dashboard, or you have a service animal that is, well, you know what? It doesn't mean anything anyway. It's all bullshit. So I just slapped the service vest on my dog. You're a person of bad character. End of the story.
So the good news is the surgeon was open to
I'm hot.
awareness.
I'm hot.
And education. So put this into context by your definition of he's made more good decisions that day.
Sure.
He just removed a giant, massive cancer out of my mom and saved her life.
Sure.
And gave me my mom back
Mm-hmm.
for however long, God's willing to have her here. And then sewed her back up and then came to her room and checked on her and my family and explained every decision and gave her really positive news because he knew that she was anxious and came back when he didn't have to. And so by your definition of more good decisions than bad decisions,
Right.
it's good character or bad character?
I would say that I'm a person of bad character sometimes. So I would say that my message would be that we all, I got hot there and I was talking about that and I even said it after, I think, but my point is to say that there's only so much advantage taking that our countries can tolerate before they descend into the other way. You understand what I mean? Before it becomes chaos.
So the choice is to make more good decisions.
Yes.
For the world.
Yes. You're right. I'm wrong.
And the irony goes, how far do you take that? Because what's the best decision for the world is for us to not be on this planet anymore because we've ruined it and we're killing it.
I disagree with that. I disagree.
We tip the scale. We use the resources of this planet to our benefit without serious thought to the consequence to the next generation.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And to overall the world. So judgment, I'm not perfect. And judgment is what in our family, I joke as above our pay grade, because in the military you have a pay grade and there's decisions that you can make up to that pay grade. So I try to stay in the boundary of judgment is above my pay grade. I can present you these facts about my surgeon, or my mother's surgeon, and about the individual, and tell you how I chose to react in that moment. And
well, I think you made the right choice. I don't think we should be a call out culture either. Like I'm on a podcast with you and I'm calling people out. Yeah, I'm wrong. I agree with your point. But what I'm saying is though, is how, like, I guess I struggle with the dynamic between those two things, like how to at the same time have, invoke my sympathy and invoke my respect, and then be wary of predators and advantage takers. I have a hard time with that balance. And to me, there are times when I just feel completely disgusted by some decisions like that, and it strikes me as so antithetical to whatever it is that we're trying to pursue in our society. And I like, for me, it's like, I don't know where to strike that balance. And when, and I want to be sympathetic, but at the same time, I don't want to be taken advantage of, and
I hear you. And so I can offer two kind of examples to that. Is that, normally simpler tends to be better. So I'll give you an example of the aspect that humans created stoplights. Prior to stoplights, there were roundabouts. And roundabouts are over 70% less lethal than a stoplight. But somewhere along the lines, we thought we would get involved and make something, because we had electricity.
Yes.
We were going to make something more complex and create a stoplight rather than a roundabout. And I think we screwed up.
I think you're right.
And so there's an element of humans getting involved too much. And I'll give you a real life scenario of that. I parked in one of those accessible parking spaces because I do have one of those plaques. Because of my heart, I occasionally cannot ambulate very far. If I go to Disneyland or an amusement park, I'm in a wheelchair. And I parked there. The irony is to go into a pet store and get food for my service animal. So I'm getting my service animal out of the back of my car, and a woman comes up from behind me and grabs me and tells me what a horrible human being I am, and that her mom is disabled, and that, I have some nerve in using this fake pass, and I'm going to hell, and all of this kind of stuff.
Sure. It's tough for
Michael,
people.
she ends up instigating a heart episode where now we have an emergency, and she's getting to witness firsthand not only how my service animal intervenes, but also why I had the disabled parking accommodation in the first place. And I imagine to this day she feels horrible. I know she felt horrible in that moment. And was embarrassed as ambulance and all of this is coming. But she made a choice in that moment to try to intervene to make the world better. And so her heart was in the right place.
Sure.
But it ended up making for a worse situation.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the other thing that I find fascinating is we can build as humans, and then when we stop building, Mother Nature takes it back.
Yes.
And so if we stop trying to intervene, the only thing I can say is that growth naturally happens. What's natural naturally happens. And I don't know what to make of that, but I am in awe of these amusement parks or these towns that we have, built and created and spent 100 years occupying. And then we move away, and in a matter of 10 years, the world takes it back. And so I understand that science is saying that we have gone too far, and that it doesn't even matter if we stop everything right now, that the world will be unable to heal itself because of the ozone and because of the water and all of this kind of stuff. All I can say is that stoplights and roundabouts, and that in abandoned cities and amusement parks and all over the world, growth happens when we stop. And so I think that goes back to the awareness, is growth happens when we just stop doing for a second and just allow and create space and permission.
So,
so
what I would say is, that's what happened with that lady is the difference between judging and passing judgment. Those are different things. We have to judge. The whole world is a constant judge. You're constantly judging things. But we cannot pass judgment on one another because of the very example of what you said. So there's a difference. What I'm saying is that I can judge when I say it's wrong to do this if you're doing that per your surgeon or per the lady with the Yorkies or whatever. But I don't get to choose who's doing what. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not passing judgment on any particular person I see. But it's interesting that the world does take back it does take back what's its. It does. The earth can return, and there's a life force too that I believe is more powerful than I think scientists understand. Something else is going on here that we don't fully understand. We're on a wet rock spinning around a nuclear fission reactor, which is spinning around the universe at extremely high speeds. So, I mean, there's a lot, like when you get into the spiritual side of it, that you can't ever comprehend. But that being said, I think it's a good place to close on. What do you think, Bunny?
I think we went really deep, really quick, and this was probably more profound than I was expecting this morning. So thank you for that space and that opportunity.
For the listeners, and if you're listening to this, Bunny, tell them your social media and your website and the places where they can find you if they're looking.
So you can always go to bunnyyoung.com. And the cool thing about that is my calendar is right there. And so I always have time for those individuals who want to make the world a better place. And then on social media, Instagram is Bunny Has Six Legs.
Bunny Has Six Legs.
Then the company's name and the website that you can always follow on social media is at abetterplaceconsulting.com. And so that's, on Instagram as well.
Bunny has 6, the number legs, or 6
Yeah.
SIX, the number of the 6. So
No,
Bunny has
the number
6, the number legs on Instagram. Folks, thank you for making it through. That was a long one, 2 hours. Bunny and I spoke about a lot of different topics, and I really, actually, Bunny, I appreciate that you're doing what you do. I just really enjoyed talking with you, and I'm thankful that there's people like Bunny out there that are getting a message out like this, that are willing to. It's hard to be a coach, folks. It's also fun to do a podcast. And if you want to start a podcast, if you're a business owner or you're someone that said, you know what, it's just on the bucket list, I want to get it done, and you don't want to do all the technical side of it, you can go to getagripstudios.com. I'm not going to spell it for you. It's getagripstudios.com. Check us out, all the social media. Also, if you go back to the website, we're going to post all of Bunny's stuff there too, so you can find it. Don't worry about writing it down if you're driving. Just go to Get a Grip on Life. A lot of Get a Grips around here. Getagriponlife.com for that. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.